back to the What Next series. This time we're covering the teams who have just been eliminated from the conference finals. For the Wolves, this was a great season. I think they outperformed expectations because a lot of people assumed that they lost that cat trade. And initially, it was a slow start. Around Christmas time, they were the 9th seed. And then eventually, they were able to get together. That second half, we saw Ant and Julius Randle learn how to play together, along with the role players starting to gel and find their spots on this team. And for the large part, that carried into the postseason the first 2 rounds, and they found themselves going back to the Western Conference Finals. However, they ran into a buzzsaw. I did expect more from Minnesota. I had them coming out of the series in 7. This series was nowhere close to going to 7. And you can see that from back in game 1. Minnesota will go on to lose in 5. And again, this is back-to-back seasons where their season ends in 5 games in the Western Conference Finals. For a lot of teams, they could consider that success. But for this Minnesota team, when you have Anthony Edwards, someone who is primed to be the face of the league one day, I expect better. I believe the fans expect more. And we as basketball fans expect more from them. And they would have lost this in a competitive 7-game series. I would have been okay with that. I would have been cool. I would have been like, you know what? You got to make some adjustments here. You got to get better there. But they lost in 5 games, and it wasn't even close. Going into this offseason, I believe when it comes to the roster construction and what moves they plan on making for the future, they got to keep in mind, as long as Anthony Edwards is on this team and he's healthy, the standard will always be getting to the playoffs. With that being said, this next hurdle going into the offseason is, can you get over the hump when you reach the 3rd round? Can you put your foot on the gas and accelerate to the NBA Finals? And that front office is going to have a ton of decisions to make. First off, Julius Randle, he has a player option going into this offseason where he can exercise it. I believe more than likely he will, because he's probably going to chase a big contract more than likely. With that being said, I don't even know if you want to bring Julius Randle back. And I'm not going to take anything away from him. He had a phenomenal first 2 series in this postseason. But in this series, he had one great game overall. That was game 3. And then he had an occasional great stretch here and there. Like back in game 1. That first half, he was phenomenal. Couldn't miss. Second half, you missed them on the court. And then for me in game 5, watching that Minnesota has their backs against the wall, I expected them to come out with so much more fight and intensity. And in that first quarter, while they're getting blitzed by that Oklahoma City Thunder defense, I see Julius Randle get turned over, and he doesn't hustle back. And I see in his body language that he didn't really want it, in my opinion. And I'm going to keep it a stack 50. That cannot be the standard if you want to go and win a championship. Just because you get turned over and you're getting blitzed in the first quarter, you guys still come with that energy. The game ain't over. You might be down 15, 17 points, but we've seen throughout the postseason, throughout this decade of basketball, you are never out of a game. So seeing that made me sour on Julius Randle. Otherwise, he had a great postseason for the most part. If I'm the Wolves, I would consider trading Julius Randle. I would only do it if it involved me getting a Kevin Durant. And it's not like it's because he's a bad player or he doesn't necessarily gel with this team. It's better GM practice if you consider dealing him for an upgrade and putting another star alongside Anthony Edwards. You have Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who's going to be a free agent, along with Naz Reid, who also has a player option and more than likely will exercise that. I've heard from a lot of the sources inside the league that more than likely Walker is going to be out and they're going to pivot towards their younger players. We saw Terrence Shannon had a great showing doing this NBA Western Conference Finals. Maybe he gets moved up to a prominent role. As for mentioned with Naz Reid, there's rumors circulating around him seeing himself as more than just a bench rotational player. He believes that he could be a starter. If the Wolves lose him, that's a big loss. I love the minutes that Naz Reid has given to the Timberwolves over the course of the past 2 seasons. And I believe it's imperative to re-sign him to make sure he's a part of this core and playing alongside Ant for the foreseeable future. If you do lose Naz, that means Jaden McDaniels has to step up. And we saw Jaden McDaniels kind of step up this postseason when he was guarded by the lesser defenders. For those who like to compare Ant to Michael Jordan, if that's the case, McDaniels will be the Scottie Pippen. This tandem between Ant and McDaniels has the potential to be one of the elite duos right now in the NBA if Jaden McDaniels is able to take a leap in his offensive game. This summer, can he add more to his bag? Can he become a better scorer off of the dribble? Can he make more offense for himself? Can he make those threes at a higher clip? If he can add those facets to his game, the Minnesota Timberwolves will elevate and what is expected to be a stacked Western Conference going into next season. And to close it off, we're going to talk about what's next for the New York Knicks. This was a successful season Although it was a limp finish this past summer, they went all in, acquiring Mikal Bridges, going after Cat before training camp. It was a slow start to their season. They didn't necessarily gel together, especially defensively, which you can make an argument they didn't gel at all. Nonetheless, what was more revealing was that they didn't have a win against a top team during that regular season. Your OKCs, your Cleveland Cavaliers, your Boston Celtics. And then we fast forward to the postseason. You see a ton of people picking against the Knicks in round one against Detroit. But you see Jalen Brunson. He goes out there. He does his thing. He shows why he's one of the best postseason performers. And defensively, although they have their moments where they weren't great, they show that they can be physical. And that was crucial when they went up against the Boston Celtics in round two, which a lot of people thought they weren't going to win a game in that series. People were being generous and giving them one so they can lose in the gentleman's sweep, but we all expected the Boston Celtics to handle business, but that's why you play the games. Boston is up 20 plus in both game 1 and 2, yet the Knicks come back and win both of those games because they had strong defensive performances along with their key guys performing in clutch minutes. We see the Knicks take a 2-0 advantage, and then game 3, Boston Celtics respond back, and then unfortunately in game 4, Jason Tatum goes down with that injury, and then the series is a wrap after that. The Knicks win in 6. We fast forward to the Eastern Conference Finals where everyone thought that the Knicks were going to come out, they were going to handle business, and they were going to reach the NBA Finals for the first time since the late 90s. The Indiana Pacers gave them a taste of their own medicine coming back in game 1. In game 2, we thought, all right, New York is going to respond back because that's been their character all postseason long. Indy takes game 2, and that's where the series was lost. The Knicks didn't have the mental toughness to pull out at least a game at home in what is supposed to be one of the most sacred arenas in the postseason, Madison Square Garden. Part of that lack of mental toughness stimulates from a lack of a defensive identity. And that's one of the cons that you get when you go out and trade for a Karl Anthony Towns. And it stems from a ton of mental lapses during the course of games. That's why we see all these dumb fouls by Cat. Going into this offseason, Cat has to commit to the defensive side of the ball. He doesn't have to be all NBA defense, first team, second, or third team. But can you just bring the effort? Can you bring that mental toughness? Can you bring the focus night in, night out? Especially when you get to the postseason. Because those mental lapses will be your undoing and will send you home. And in some ways, is this on Tibbs? Because he's a defensive-minded coach. You think he will be able to come up with a game plan to counter this Indiana Pacers offense, but they didn't really have any answers barring Game 5. And yes, Game 5's defensive game plan was brilliant, but a lot of that comes down to effort and just focus. Too often during the course of that series, it felt like the New York Knicks just lost focus and they weren't able to go out and defend for 48 minutes. They had stretches where they defended well for 5, maybe 7 minutes at a time, but you got to put together a complete ball game, or at least close to a complete ball game, in order for you to win and advance to the NBA Finals. And speaking of Tibbs, there was a ton of criticism regarding whether or not he's the right guy to coach this team. I'll be honest, I believe you just run it back with the same coaching staff. Tibbs has definitely helped the Knicks get back to meaningful basketball in New York. I'm looking more at the roster construction. Do you keep a Mikal Bridges? Do you keep OG Anunoby? Do you keep Cat? To me, I'm keeping OG. His championship pedigree is unmatched, and I believe that showed throughout the course of this series, especially doing the runs by Indiana. You're going to need a guy like that if you want to win the East next year. Mikal had some bright moments defensively, which a lot of people expected that from him, considering he was a defensive player first before we saw the offensive explosion. Now, offensively, I don't know what happened at the start of the year. He lost a jump shot. I'm not really sure how that even came about, but offensively, he was almost a no-show in a ton of games. As for Cat, I'm not really too sure if they go out and trade him, but if you can turn Cat into a Giannis, that's not too crazy. I actually think Giannis with this team might be that toughness that puts them over the top, especially out east where Boston isn't going to be the same. And then you got Cleveland, who's going to be looking to redeem themselves after a lackluster exit in the second round. Then you got some up-and-coming teams in Orlando and Detroit. But realistically, the Knicks have a pathway back to the Eastern Conference Finals. It just stems around whether or not they can surround this roster with the right pieces. Maybe trading Cat is necessary for that to happen. Look at that bench. There was only 2 guys that Tibbs really trusted. That was McBride and Mitchell Robinson. Eventually, Mitchell Robinson was put into the starting lineup, moving Josh Hart back to the bench. And then from game 3 onward, they actually started playing more of their bench. They got good minutes from Landry Shamet. They got good minutes from Wright. If the front office does decide to trade away Cat, that could be great for the Knicks and their depth moving forward, because maybe you get that star player alongside a couple of role players who can fit into your rotation for next season. As we heard throughout this postseason, this summer is going to be crazy. A lot of NBA insiders are expecting a ton of trades, a ton of movement. If that's the case, both New York and Minnesota have to be aggressive this offseason. It's not guaranteed that if you run it back, you'll end up in the conference finals once again. So it's important for them to listen to offers. And keep in mind, we are in the parity era of the NBA. We're about to crown our 7th straight new champion. So if you want to do more than just contend and actually be in a position to win a championship, it starts here this summer. If you guys are here and you watch the whole video, I appreciate you. Make sure you subscribe. We got NBA Finals breakdown and prediction coming out tomorrow.